This screen is not a suggestion. It is the visible edge of a system that has been restructuring how America pays for service for over 150 years, and you are funding it. In 1990, the suggested tip was 15%. By 2005, 18%. By 2020, 20%. Walk into a restaurant today and you will see 22%, 25%, even 30%. That is a 15-point jump in one generation. Inflation did not double in that time. Food costs did not double. Wages did not double. So what did? The answer sits inside a single number, $2.13, that has not moved in 35 years. The federal tipped minimum wage has been $2.13 an hour since 1991. In 1996, Congress passed a law that decoupled it from the regular minimum wage. That meant when the regular wage rose, the tipped wage stayed frozen. Permanently, 35 years, no movement. Adjusted for inflation, $2.13 in 1991 is worth over $5 today. The actual wage is still $2.13. Here is what that means. A server working 40 hours a week is guaranteed $85.20 in base wages from their employer. The restaurant must ensure the server earns at least the regular minimum wage of $7.25. But that calculation happens over an entire pay period. A busy Friday night subsidizes a dead Tuesday lunch. The employer rarely pays a dime above $2.13. The system has offloaded the cost of front-of-house labor from the restaurant to the customer, and it has done so for so long that the offloading has become invisible. You do not question the tip line. It is just what you do. That is the architecture working as designed. This system did not emerge by accident. It was built. Tipping arrived in the United States after the Civil War, imported by wealthy Americans who'd seen it practiced in Europe. It landed first on a workforce with zero bargaining power, Pullman train car porters who were paid almost nothing by the railroad and survived entirely on tips from the passengers they served. Restaurants copied the model. By the early 1900s, tipping was standard. And for decades, tipped workers were excluded from minimum wage laws entirely. They had no wage floor. Zero. In 1966, Congress extended minimum wage protections to tipped workers for the first time, with a catch. The tip credit allowed employers to pay a fraction of the regular minimum, assuming tips would cover the gap. Over the next 3 decades, that fraction eroded from roughly 50% down to the 1991 floor of $2.13. In 1996, the tipped wage was decoupled from the regular minimum and frozen. It has not moved since. The National Restaurant Association, one of Washington's most powerful lobbying groups, has spent millions keeping it frozen. Every proposed increase meets the same argument. Raising the tipped wage would destroy the industry. And here is where the system gets elegant. Because they are not entirely wrong. A full-service restaurant runs on a 3 to 6% net profit margin. Out of every $100 you spend, roughly $30 goes to food, $30 to labor, $25 to rent and overhead, and $3 to $6 is profit. Now zoom into the labor slice. In a tipped restaurant, the front of house, servers, bartenders, bussers, costs the employer almost nothing in wages. $2.13 an hour times 40 hours is $85.20 a week. The rest comes from you. If tipping were eliminated and those workers were paid $20 to $25 an hour, the labor slice would grow by 15 to 20% of revenue. Menu prices would rise by the same amount. The $26 steak becomes $31. A $26 steak with a 20% tip costs $31.20. The same steak on a no-tip menu priced at $31, you pay almost the same amount either way. The difference is transparency, and transparency is exactly what the system fights. Because a $31 steak on the menu loses to a $26 steak on the menu next door, even if the $26 steak carries a compulsory 20% tip that makes it $31.20. The customer sees the lower number, walks in, and the hidden surcharge lands after the meal. Even the people who try to break the loop get pulled back in. In 2015, a prominent New York restaurateur eliminated tipping across his fine dining group and raised menu prices to cover full wages. By 2020, he had walked it back. Not because the math failed, it worked. But servers left. Top servers at high-end restaurants earn $40 to $60 an hour in tips. No restaurant can match that in wages. The tip system creates a workforce that cannot afford to leave it and an ownership class that cannot afford to change it. The machine holds everyone in place. So if the tipped minimum wage has been frozen since 1991, why have tips climbed from 15% to 25%? There are three forces at work. Force 1, the POS terminal. When payment shifted from pen and paper to a digital screen, the tip became a button, not a calculation. The default suggestions, 18, 20, 22%, anchor your expectation. Behavioral economists call this anchoring bias. You think you are being reasonable at 20% because the screen showed you 25. But 20% today is 5 points higher than what was generous in 1990. Force 2, tip creep across categories. The terminal spread beyond restaurants, coffee shops, fast casual counters, bakeries, takeout. Every transaction now presents a tip screen. Pew Research found that 72% of Americans say tipping is expected in more places today than 5 years ago. Bankrate found that 63% of Americans now hold a negative view of tipping, up from 59% the previous year. The frustration is real, but it is misdirected at the screen instead of the structure behind it. Force 3. The frozen wage forces tips higher. This is the loop. The tipped minimum stays at $2.13. The cost of living rises every year. Tips must rise to compensate. The percentage is not going up because service improved. It is going up because $2.13 buys less with each passing year, and the tip is the only variable that can adjust. Those higher tip expectations become the restaurant lobby's proof that the system works. Look, servers make good money, but that rising tip income is the system compensating for the frozen wage. It is not a feature. It is the symptom. Now the newest layer. In 2025, Congress passed the No Tax on Tips Act. Workers can now deduct up to $25,000 in tip income from federal income taxes. The law was sold as a win for tipped workers, money back in their pockets. But the deduction expires in 2028. It does not apply to payroll taxes, meaning Social Security and Medicare still come out. And it does nothing to change the $2.13 minimum wage. Meanwhile, the IRS has known about massive tip underreporting for decades. Government estimates peg the annual unreported gap in the billions. Most tipped workers, especially those in cash-heavy establishments, report only a fraction of their actual tip income, or none at all. So, what does a tax deduction mean for workers who were never reporting the income in the first place? For the minority who do report, mostly full-time servers at larger establishments, it is a modest benefit. For everyone else, it changes nothing. And for the restaurant industry, it is a gift. The tax break reduces pressure to raise wages. The $2.13 stays frozen. The subsidy continues. The law does not fix the system, it reinforces it. This system has been running for more than a century. You will not dismantle it by stiffing a server. The server did not set the policy. The owner is trapped by the economics. The lobbyist is paid to maintain the freeze. Everyone inside the machine is responding to incentives the machine created. But you can see it. Tip on the pre-tax amount, not the post-tax total. The tax is not service. At counter service, Coffee shops, fast casual counters, takeout. Those workers are typically paid at least the regular minimum wage, not $2.13. $1 is fine. 0 is also fine. When you see a restaurant that has eliminated tipping and raised menu prices, recognize what it is. Someone is trying to break the loop. Eating there is a vote. The federal tipped minimum wage is $2.13 an hour. It has not changed since 1991. The tip is not a reward, it is a subsidy, and you are the one paying it. The system is not random. This is behind the spends. Decoding the systems behind spending.